Guys, thank you for coming. It's an honor to be here, and we're pretty excited to show you this stuff. So, my name's MYHILL, and this is GERALD ORBAN. And we're working on Homeworld Shipbreakers, which is the sequel to Homeworld 2. It's in Unity, obviously, and we've been working on it on and off for
a couple of years now.
Yeah. So we're going to just drop in. We're going to show you our teaser trailer. We've only released 2 screenshots in like the last year, so this is the most anyone's ever seen on a project for a long time.
So enjoy.
So we're just going to drop in. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, sounds like you guys enjoyed that. That's great. We got a lot to talk about today. My name is GERALD. I'm a lead programmer at Blackbird Interactive. I've been there actually since the company's inception. In my past, in my spare time, I actually design electronics and hardware for the control systems of a giant walking robot called Prosthesis. And I've also worked on the control systems for a new type of flight simulator, which I hope someday in the future you guys might see, but maybe not. It was a university project. But what I do at Blackbird Interactive, more importantly, is I develop the graphics and the physics systems and code. And for the core engine, if I haven't written it, I've helped design it at some point in my past 5 years at Blackbird.
And I'm Adam. A little background. I'm the director of photography and the backup art director when Rob Cunningham's not in the office. Been in games for about 15 years, worked at EA for a long time. And I did the procedural camera system in Frostbite. So I worked on that for a couple of years, and that was a really exciting project. And then I quit games for a little while and shot some movies and got analog for a little bit, but then missed games, so I've come back. So we're going to talk about procedural cameras. And what are procedural cameras? Well, what's the problem here? Cameras are often really overlooked. They're often done as tasks by people who aren't super passionate about them, and it's not a simple problem. It's actually a really complicated problem. And the code often gets to be this big ball of spaghetti, and it's sort of hard-coded with like a couple of variables that are exposed, but you can't really deal with the relationships between things. And the workflows are totally painful, and I'm probably preaching to the choir. If anyone here is doing cameras, the tools can be really frustrating. You can't even see what you're doing sometimes. And at the end, to cap all that off, once you're done, the cameras just feel crappy. They don't have any weight to them. They feel super video gamey, and they're not compelling. So that's a problem. And something which is passionate to our heart is proceduralism is not common with cutscenes. Like cutscenes are often super canned. You animate the character, you animate the camera, and it's set. But then an animator will change something, and your cameras are broken. So that's not fun. So
yeah, the whole idea behind procedural cameras is that we're shooting blind. We don't know where actors are going to be, who they are sometimes, but we have a really good idea of what looks good and how to frame these shots. So these entities are virtual actors. They don't exist at edit time or outside of playtime, actually. And Adam or any cinematographer on our project understands the composition, where they want to frame the subject, and where the camera will sit in relation to it. And we set these rules up, and we let the cameras go when the game runs. And what this tool is actually called is CINEMACHINE. It's a tool which Adam and I have developed at Blackbird to kind of solve these problems and challenges where our virtual actors don't exist until the user hits play in the game.
So how did this start? About 6 years ago, I started working in games and cameras, and I was doing them in XML, and I was like, this is just, come on, really? We're making cameras, and like you do it in this, text edit, and you submit it, and you see your cameras 20 minutes later, and it was just, horrible. And things have improved since then, but the tools are still, they could use a lot of work. So this drove a real passion for me to build really compelling, visually driven camera tools. I mentioned the Frostbite, so I worked with those guys for a few years, and that was a really great experience. And we said, you know, when I joined Blackbird, why don't we put all this stuff into Unity? Like, why don't we give Unity some really bitching procedural camera tools? So what are the challenges? Like, how do you make games look like movies but still be games? And these are games that want to look like movies, like not all games do, but how do you approach that problem? And how do you film a variable performance in a cinematic way? Like, the users have controllers, things are moving, it's not always the same. So how do you film something that's changing, that can do unexpected things, but in a way that it feels like, you know, a camera language that we understand? And how do you find that totally elusive balance between what looks great and what plays great? Like, sometimes really good cameras frustrating and heavy for gameplay, and then sometimes the best gameplay cameras look really shitty. So what's the overlap there? So, you know, to underscore, cameras are the window into our digital world. Like, video game genre is actually dictated by the definition of camera, like third-person action-adventure, first-person shooter. Like, it's camera that defines game genre. And we've grown up watching a lot of television, and we've seen it through this window, and we understand how cameras move, how they feel, like the weight of them. And whether you think you know it or not, you have a pretty deep subconscious understanding of camera language. So games are new, and there's a lot of interesting opportunities here, but I think we need to respect that we got 100 years of cinema behind us, and like, what stuff do we want to bring forward from that into this new exciting world? And this is a pretty powerful idea, and I firmly have seen this, you know, believe this, and I've seen it happen so many times. By only improving the camera in your game, you can make your game seem so much better. Like, amazing cameras can sweep a lot of mediocre art up, and you can have an okay camera, and then you go to a great camera, and the whole game just comes right up. So cameras are not something to underinvest in.
Cool. So Adam's spoken a lot about the theoretical side of things, which is totally valid, but why we chose to develop this tool for Unity and for our project is we wanted it to be robust enough, to resist these behavioral changes and tuning changes. So quite often, since we're a real-time strategy game, let's say the turning rate or the speed of a vehicle changes, and we've had a canned or hand-authored animation that is now completely blown out because the units just don't even appear on screen when they should, and they miss their cues. We also want the tool to be able to handle swaps in actors and small changes in the environment. It's not going to be robust enough to accept a building placed in front of the camera, because naturally that would require a little bit different shot there. And we wanted to be able to frame and shoot dynamic gameplay. For instance, the combat behaviors in our game are very, very dynamic and very fast-paced, and we want to be able to pick a target, to mount the camera to, tell it to look at something else, and be able to frame the whole experience in a really, really fun and exciting way. So let's talk about other cameras in other games. So we're going to look at a couple of different side scores here. The images I took from a fantastic Game of Sutra article, where he breaks down how cameras have kind of evolved from the Atari days up until we have in terms of side scrollers. So we have these white lines that kind of show you the constraints of the camera, where the camera is always trying to draw their actors to with respect to the frame. Donkey Kong Country was actually quite a simple game, it wasn't a hard game actually, but the camera system was always trying to pull either Diddy or Donkey to the bottom of the screen along that white line. And we call this positional easing or positional lerping, where the camera is always trying to close the gap to 0. And another personal favorite of mine is Super Meat Boy, where they extended this so it's not just a one-dimensional constraint. It's trying to keep Meat Boy in the center of the frame where the crosshatches are. And it's always pulling the camera and easing and lerping to make sure he's in the center of the action. So getting a little more complex and crazy action, Geometry Wars, as we all remember, is a really intense, fast-paced game, and its camera does a little bit different things. This is called positional averaging, where it's trying to frame the average position of all the players in the game presently and the center of the screen to make sure that you're always focused on where the most action is going to be. And once we add a new dimension, for instance, in Super Smash Brothers, we have a dynamic fit to frame, where the camera is always trying to dolly in or dolly out to make sure all players are on screen and look at the average position of all the players to make sure the action is always right there and the user's never frustrated because they've fallen off screen. And having said that, we're a free look camera 3D RTS game. That's a lot more than 2 or 2.5 dimensions. We have a lot more to deal with, and the problem space gets a lot larger. So what procedural cameras look like in our game is something like this.
This is a really simple shot, actually. It's a very basic animation curve on the camera. But the camera is targeting the window procedurally, and the camera's motion is relative to the vehicle. So the vehicle can change speed. It could be somewhere else in the world. And we'd still get a great shot. We're layering noise over top. And really, this camera just took a few minutes to set up, and it's pretty robust. You can change a lot of things in the scene, and it's still going to scrape this great shot out of it.
So yeah, the heart of this whole system and this tool is the CineMachine director. It is our model behavior entry into the whole procedural camera system. And the approach we took is there are a lot of different behaviors we want to support, and they're actually opted into a la carte based off of the behaviors you want the camera to experience. The first one being the composer. We'll talk about what these are coming up. I'm just going to list them off right now. The transposer, our Perlin noise function, and there are going to be more coming soon to this tool because we want to keep on growing this to put more tools in our artists' hands. And these all function on our virtual camera rigs. And what a virtual camera rig is actually a pretty simple construct. It's a couple of Unity game objects with the root object being our dolly, which is what the virtual camera moves around translationally. And you can actually, it's pretty flexible. You can have any number of objects in between the dolly and the child camera itself to add any kind of extra behaviors through scripting or other animation-driven variables, where the camera's body only responsibility is to rotate the point towards the target, or if you're not using the composer, don't even rotate the point towards the target.
And that's an important point. We build up different rigs for different types of shots.
Yeah.
And it's all in the artist's control.
Yeah.
So the composer, this is a really simple and an incredibly powerful thing. And basically what it does, it takes our whole world, the whole 3D view space, and it flattens it into a 2D view frustum, which is in screen space, and it allows you to compose objects on the screen. It's got tunable easing to give camera weight or kind of slop like a real cameraman does. They're never hard pinned to something. There's always a little bit of latency in their movement. And it's got this area for dead zone where it'll ignore motion on screen within that region. And then lastly, it's got these hard boundaries around the outside where it'll always track the subject. So if the target hits the hard edge, it'll keep it in. The camera will rotate to keep that on screen.
Yeah, and it is not as easy as it sounds or looks.
Yeah, well, this spent a long
we had
time on
about
this.
3 or 4 iterations scrapped and rewritten because the vector math and making sure your precision is actually respected across the ridiculous distances and situations we have. We had to make sure that it didn't break down when the subject is 10 kilometers away and you have a 1-degree lens to film it with.
So let's look at that. So here's the preview. We're targeting the base runner, the green dots, the target. The red areas are where the subject can never go, and the blue areas are where it tries to keep the shot in based on the delay amount that you've set. So this is real time. The game's not running. This is in preview, and we're composing the shot. We're setting these things up, and these settings, this configuration is saved at the per shot level. So you can say, okay, I want to do this next shot, and I want to target the base runner like this. And you can see how the base runner moves, and it disregards the motion in the middle, but as soon as it gets to that point on the screen, the camera rotates to follow it. And here we are like cranking that down a little bit more, so you're making that spot a little bit smaller and saying, okay, we want to compose you here, and it'll do that. This is a really interesting idea. You're kind of turning it around backwards. You're setting your shots up based on compositional rules, and the camera just figures it out. So there's no more animating the camera's position, orientation to try to track something. You're just saying, this is where I want it on screen. And it doesn't care if you turn the camera around. Like here in preview, we're just spinning the actual camera body around. It's still going to compose the subject to be wherever you'd like it. So you can see on the right, just grabbing the camera and zinging it around. And you can see how the green is coming outside and it's sort of going into that blue zone, the green dot, and that's because we've got a little bit of what we call slop or squish on that, which sort of emulates when the game's running, more like what a real cameraman would do. And right now we've turned it down to 0, and it's like hard pinned to that point on the screen, and we can crank it up to a number at seconds, and it will let the subject kind of slop around on the screen. And that's a really important thing when you're tracking something that's moving quickly. You don't want to hard pin your camera to it. You want to decouple those.
Yeah, I just want to point out that it does look a little jumpy in the editor. It's because of some strange behavior of Unity's execute and edit mode tag you add to your scripts. or update doesn't run exactly when you expect it to, but I'll speak a bit more about that when I talk about our challenges.
So it doesn't care where the camera body is, it's still going to figure the shot out, and you can change the zoom, doesn't matter. Zoom in on it, it's still going to put that thing right where you want it on screen. So as a camera artist, you're composing shots compositionally. No, okay, we want a little bit higher, a little bit lower, just dial the shot up, and a designer can change the speed of the vehicle, you can change the terrain to have bumps in it, the camera still figures it out. It's not 100% bug-proof, you know, of course not, but it's pretty good because it's just like a smart little camera operator that's in-game trying to get the best shot out of whatever's happening. And right now you can see that the target's right at the center of the object. That's rarely where you want to target it. So we've got offset controls, and they're local to the vehicle space. You can say, okay, now I want to target the window. So what's fun about this is on your timeline, you can set up a bunch of different shots, and you just pick your subjects and where you want to shoot them and how you want to compose them, and you just let it go. And it's different every time, but it's always in the spirit of what you want. And sometimes those differences can be pretty entertaining, but still, the little camera guys figure the shot out. And with the amount of times that our level designers have changed the unit speeds on our game, seriously would go insane if I had to.
Yeah, it saves us a lot of time.
So here we are too now, just scrolling the vehicle back and forth, and you can see that the camera is orienting itself to still keep that composition. So it's pretty cool. You do it all visually. The transposer it's the way that the camera body mounts to something. So think of it like a GoPro camera or like a car mount, and it just allows you to take your camera and say, okay, I want you to be stuck to this thing, and then gives you some offset and relationship control. So you can put the camera onto a character or a vehicle. You can animate it too, so it can do animated dolly shots, and then it's got tunable tracking and dampening on each axis. So it's a really simple thing, but it's incredibly versatile. It used to be a lot bigger, more complicated, and we just pulled this much away. So it's actually a very light little component, but quite powerful. So here's that video again. No, sorry, this is a new video, and this is a single animation on the camera, a really simple one.
Or we're just animating the offset with respect to the vehicle in this shot.
But it's all relative to the vehicle, and it's composing the vehicle, and you can change its speed, you can move it somewhere else in the world, and the cameras don't care, they'll figure it out. And then noise is the last component that works really well together with these things, and it's pretty off the shelf, procedural, positional, rotational noise. It's Perlin based, but you can layer it, and that's kind of where the mojo is. So you have as many layers as you want per channel. So you get a lot of really interesting behaviors by mixing low, mid, and high frequencies together. And something that I was doing, I was trying to get some really good camera shakes. So we took the movie Ronin, and I pulled a little clip out and put it in through Synthesize, which is like a camera extraction software for match moving. And you can see these are the top row, that's the frequency of the camera animation. Like those are its rotational curves, and it's like, okay, so how do we design fake noise to look like this? So if you're trying to emulate noise, it's an interesting technique to do that. So the three of these guys together is really powerful. And you got all sorts of options, like you can mount camera to object A and track object B, and vice versa. And what's really cool about having tools where artists can make things is he can make some other cool stuff. It's not like, hey, Gerald, I need the camera to do this right now. It's like we've got our own little playpen. We can do whatever we want, and engineers get to make more stuff. Oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is just one more thing on the noise. This is...
Yeah, so I just want to draw your attention to the noise in this shot. I know we showed it earlier, but the procedural noise is several like high and low octaves just to kind of give an extra bouncy feel. And imagine if this was a completely calm camera simply orbiting around our hero unit. The sense of chaos and urgency would totally not be there, and it's so important to get this right when you're setting up the framing and the intents behind your shots.
And our game's got dozens and dozens of different noise parameters for handhelds with wide-angle lenses, handhelds with, mounted to a vehicle, all sorts of different ones. So you can just save them as different presets and drop them on your camera.
Cool. So I'm going to talk a bit about the tech and the engineering stuff that I did behind CINEMACHINE. First of all, Unity is very interesting when it comes to order of operations. Everything kind of like picks and chooses when it's going to run. So this is why we came up with this kind of master script that kind of owns when and how things get applied based off of what the user chooses to apply from our modules set. So I'm not going to go all the way through it, but it's pretty clear we have 3 different modules here that all have to happen in a specific order. And depending on what happens before and after, you could have different behaviors where the camera is either ahead of frame or behind a frame of the subject you're tracking. Or you could, yeah, exactly, track it frame behind. But it's very important to understand that. So when you set it up in your script execution order, you have to know where the things are going to be and whether or not you're frame ahead, behind, or on the current frame. And I wanted to make a lot of promises to the dev team, too, when I designed this, because no one likes a bad tool. It should be written well. It should be simple to understand. Everyone should be able to figure it out at first blush. There shouldn't be any tapping on the shoulder, hey, GERALD, what does this variable do? Because it's not productive. It's just something simple. It should just work. From all of our modules and behaviors, we wanted to kind of construct them in a way that you could put them together such that what you get out of combining them is greater than them individually. And since it's a completely modular system and it's all a la carte, it allows us to extend the system and add new modules in the future as we develop the tool set. And most importantly, empower the dev team. I did a Unite talk in Vancouver in 2013 where I talked about empowering developers in user interface and user experience design. We wanted to carry this forward and make it work for this tool in much the same way. It should be all data-driven. So one of the major promises, I wanted to make sure in preview or in editor previewing outside of play mode works, which is where this execute and edit mode tag comes from. And if you search Unity answers and the forums and stuff, you might see a couple people complaining about this. And yes, there are issues with it, but it works well enough that you can actually check out these behaviors and see what's going on outside of play mode. And something that Unity doesn't have quite right yet is live tuning while the game is playing and saving that data back into your assets. There are a lot of engines out there which do blur the line between play and edit mode, and we wanted to kind of blur the line a bit more with this tool. So any changes you make to the modules and their settings actually translate and save while the game is playing, so you can easily live tune your shots. And yeah, like I said, it was challenging, but we found a way to make all this work so the dev team can work unobstructed. And of course, this is a tool set we wanted to interface nicely with all the humans, computers, and third-party plugins that we have. So we really had to make sure that all the inputs are serializable, accessible via the Unity animator, and easy to use for scripting. Any APIs I expose should be clean, well-documented, and easy to use for any coder who's never had experience with this tool before. And we've already integrated into several tools which we use internally, which are Cinematography for our timelining for our animations and cutscenes, and UScript, which we use for our mission scripting. So I'm going to go over a couple of quick challenges. I mentioned tight angles and floating point problems. It did cause some problems, and we'll go over them right now. Next. Yeah. So with narrow angles, let's say I have a lens which is 1 degree wide and a subject 10,000 meters away, and I move half a meter per second. Resolving that difference in screen space can be a little challenging depending on how you structure your mathematics. So yeah, we overcame that by just changing the coordinate spaces and the local reference frames where we do all our math, and it kind of just disappeared, which is great. And then before I even went down that path, I was really resistant to it. I just told Adam, hey, can't we just make the lens wider and move the camera in closer? Because that's the same thing, right?
No.
So I ran an experiment. Here is our hero unit with a 1 degree lens at about 10,000 meters distance away. And here it is again with a 60 degree lens about 10 meters away. Obviously, the intent and the framing of the shot, it looks very different due to perspective warping. As a programmer, I didn't really understand that, and I ate a huge slice of humble pie that day.
GERALD, we need longer lenses. No, you don't. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, so there we go.
We got them.
Yeah, so just to summarize that, yeah, floating point was a big problem for us to start. It got solved, and we can't just ignore the fact that things tend to break down because a user is going to do crazy things they don't expect, and it should be smart enough to kind of handle all cases. And finally, Unity has 3 different ways of doing its updates. It has its fixed update, which is in the physics tick. It has a late update, which happens after regular update, and update, which happens on update. So this whole frame rate lock thing is a contentious issue in the PC world because if users want to unlock their frame rate, they want to run it at any frame rate possible. So having a variable frame rate causes issues with easing and motion of the camera, where depending on the frame rate, it could move faster and slower. It's a problem we had to overcome. And then the 3 different update types, we have to make sure that when we run our motion scripts, it has to happen at the right time that we can account for when physics moves it or when a presentation frame moves it. And unfortunately, I would like the idea of using fixed update because your delta time is always the same, your lerps are always going to come out the same. However, in poor performance situations where your frame rate is actually slower than your fixed update rate, the fixed updates will start stacking one after the other, and you'll lose transform updates in between it, which can cause some stepping and kind of jaggy motion in your camera at low frame rates.
So here's a quick shot. This is in Cinematography, and the guys are right here. This is Dan and Adrian. Check them out tomorrow on the floor by the Unity Asset Store area. We love Cinematography. It's the cornerstone of all of our cutscenes. You can see at the top we've got different camera shots, and then the next row is vehicle waypoints, and then the use script events underneath there are, sorry, not the use script, the events underneath that are switching targets, so it's a camera switching composition of different targets, and then we got F-curves for either props in the world or the camera's animating. So it's a really, really robust, fast way to set it up. And some of them get really huge. We've got some which are giant. But this is the gist of it. Lay your shots in, tell it what to look at, set up the composition on them, and away you go.
It's a lot of information to process, but the interface to our tools are actually like 2 of those little ticks on like the 4th swim lane, and everything else is just like animating other props in the scene.
Yeah, I'm like, don't spend time fighting with the tools anymore. We're just making beautiful shots, and that's a really, really great place to be. And here's a shot of us in, a preview and doing a sequence near the end of the game. And I just say camera to be behind the lander this far, and I want about this much squishiness on it, and I want to compose it this way, and we go in and animate the landers, and the cameras just figure it out. So we've finally gotten into a good place to work with. So the next steps, well, maybe you're part of the next steps. We're going to share this stuff. So if you guys are doing cameras, if you've got game cameras or cinematic cameras or cameras, anything that might benefit from this, email us, come grab me, get my business card, because it's not on the Unity Asset Store yet. We're thinking about when to do it. We have to final Shipbreakers, and we're super tired right now, so it's not going to happen for a few weeks, but that's perhaps the next step, but we'd like to make some partnerships now with anyone if they would like some procedural camera tools for Unity. We're going to make more modules. So this is sort of our roadmap. These are all different modules. The blue ones we've already made. The orange ones are up next. And these are all things that I've designed and built before in Frostbite. So I worked on Need for Speed and other games, and I'm pretty familiar with those procedural camera systems. So we're going to just make them all in Unity so you can have them.
Cool. Well,
so thanks for coming.
That's actually a time lapse of our office for 24 hours. Yeah. So open the floor to any questions.
Hi. I saw in your system you got the green dot. Do you guys allow for more than one green dot? So you want to look at 2 characters at one time and frame in the scene?
Yeah, that's something that we don't presently have implemented in the system, but it's certainly on our horizon and something we do wish to support. In some of those side score examples, I was talking about positional averaging and multiple actors. It's something we have an eye towards and a plan for, but the demands of the project stated only one actor right now, but we're certainly going to add support for that.
Right, you want 2 characters talking and 3 characters talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a number of challenges with that. There's a few different ways to skin that cat, depending on what the solution is, but it's something we've done before, and it's something that is a great thing to have. It's just for Shipbreakers, we didn't really need it, so it's going to to come up. Next.
The whole scene setup of, where you want the actual box and everything, do you guys allow interpolation of, I want the box to be in the lower left screen all the way going to the right,
like to actually animate the box?
Yes.
Yeah, so there's 2 ways around that. One is the animated composer offsets, which is something that I think is like 4 away on GERALD's list right now. It keeps getting put down with like optimizing Shipbreakers because it needs to be optimized.
Still a fantastic game, though.
Yeah, and then the next is to actually blend between 2 shots that have different composer settings, and that's a great way to do it too. So absolutely, but it's not in this current version.
Cool, thanks. Bree next.
Hey, it looks great.
Thank you.
My question is, it looks like you're mostly using this for cutscenes. Have you ever done any like gameplay stuff with these kinds of systems?
Yeah, so the development demand has been driven by the needs of the game right now, but absolutely we do intend on this to be a generic camera system which can be used for multiple genres and types of camera systems.
Yeah, so in that roadmap we had, there's a third-person action-adventure camera rig, which works really well. And it's had a couple years of experience on it. And then there's one called the Reactor for driving cameras. So we don't plan to blanket everything. We're just doing the ones which we know well and which we are pretty confident that will be well received. And those are the ones we're going to tackle next.
Is it, did I get cut off?
Oh, we're getting cut.
Okay.
Yep,
We got
we're out of
20
time.
seconds left. Oh, yeah.
All right, you want to finish?
Oh, yeah, no, it works. It's fine for 2D. It's
All
great.
right. Yeah, we're getting kicked out, so we'll be in the hall in a few minutes. If you guys have any more questions, we can talk to you directly.
Yeah, thanks for coming, guys.